Actually, there's more. When Jesus taught, was seated, right? Most of the time. When we see him teaching, he's seated. The only time that he was standing is when he confronted the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. Maybe that's how the custom came into the church. Probably not a safe thing to say here. You'll be glad to know we got a chain letter this week. And it's a pastoral change letter, and it said, simply send a copy of this letter to 6 other churches who are tired of their ministers. Then to bundle up your pastor and send him to the church at the top of the list and add your name to the bottom of the list. And in 1 week, you will receive 16,436 ministers. And one of them should be a dandy, but fortunately, David didn't write the chain back. I do need some to do some housekeeping. This is going to happen periodically. That's why I say that these pauses, I don't have. Parkinson's is winning the physical race, but God is winning the spiritual race. So we just keep praying that that's what's going to happen. And, we have a special thing going on here. I don't know if you really understand that. Caleb is an incredibly humble, hardworking young man. And I'm glad the elders had the sense to let him get away for a while. We were talking, and he said, maybe you and I could show how older believers and younger believers get together. It's kind of like this lays out pretty interestingly if we have this division. So we can have the geeks and the geezers, right? Which is it's a book title in my hood, actually a pretty good idea. I woke up at 4 o'clock this morning. I had this wonderful, tidy little sermon that I was going to share with you. And at 4 o'clock this morning, which is not an uncommon time to be, it's an ungodly time, but it's not uncommon that would be time. And the Lord just impressed on my heart. And if you would turn to Joshua chapter 3. Can you see that slide up there? There's this little phrase in Joshua chapter 3, verse 6. And at the end of verse 6, see this little phrase up here? You have not passed this way before. Israel is getting ready to launch. They just spent 40 years on a 30-day trek. If they'd gone directly to their destination after leaving, it would have taken about 30 days. So they were able to cram that 30 days into 40 years. And now they're standing there ready to launch. And in chapters 3, chapter 2, you're familiar. He sent out the spies to scout out the land and bring back the mission. But 1 and 3 is really quite significant. And so, we don't. Keep that slide up there for a little bit. But here's what happened. God's preparing them to go, and he speaks to Joshua first and tells Joshua to be courageous. And then he says to the children of Israel, be courageous. Then he says to the whole group, be courageous. And that's significant because in the Hebrew language, there's no, as I've mentioned probably before, they don't use superlatives. We say fast, faster, and fastest, right? Well, their language doesn't accommodate that. They say, holy, holy, holy. Anytime they repeat something three times, it's to accomplish that same thing. And so they're standing there getting ready to cross, and he says to them, be courageous. I think that's a significant word for us. Where'd my slide changer go? Okay. Thank you. Scared me. That wasn't. Are you familiar with the work of Simon Sinek? Young people here. One of the most significant communicators with young people in America today, and he says the number one quality that is needed in our day is courage. And you think that's true? As we look down and try and see what's going on in our world, just turmoil. And we need going into this new year to be courageous. Whatever that might look like to you and whatever that might look, it'll look different to me probably. It's time to be courageous. One philosopher said, it's time to put the adventure back into the Christian venture. Okay? It's time to reignite that in us, that spirit of courage. John, hold your hand up so they can see this is, since I'm going to say something about you that's so bizarre, I want them to be able to know. How many times have you jumped out of an airplane? You'd think you'd learn, right? 4,500 times he jumped out of an airplane. Perfectly good airplanes. Our son was a Marine Corps sniper, and he liked to jump out of airplanes, and he's our quietest child. We had 3 children, one of each. It used to be funnier than it is today, right? But he's the one that wouldn't stand and lead in silent prayer. But one night he was talking to us about jumping out of airplanes. He said there are two types of jump, high-ho and high-low, right? The high-ho is you jump out and you float for a long, long time, right? And he said it's the worst kind of, because all you can do is think about what could break or, but he said when you jump out and it's high, you jump out at high altitude and open low altitude, he said that's thrilling. That's when you're actually flying. I thought he was going to break into a song of Volare, the flying boy. But he said, then he said something pretty keen. He said, Dad, I think that's why we struggle in the church, is because God created us to be high-ho people, high-low people, and we're high-ho people. That was insightful. That we should be courageous, and those that step out there. Next slide, brother, please. Uh-oh. Well, he told them to be prepared. So what are we doing to prepare ourselves for the venture ahead? How are we getting ready for what to come? There's so much confusion in our world, right? We just have challenge after challenge, and if we don't purposely prepare ourselves, prepare our hearts, we're not going to be successful. So he says to them, be prepared. Next slide, please. He says to them, be holy. It's a word we don't use much anymore, isn't it? I was thinking about that. Be holy. We used to use a word that church doesn't use as much as it used to be. It's the word sin. We used to talk about sin, didn't we? I had a friend come by just recently, and he goes to a church in this town, one of the finest churches. They just hired a new pastor, and he calls him in, and he went in to talk to him. My friend went in to talk to him, and he said, "We don't want to talk about sin. We don't want to talk about judgment. We don't want to talk about those things that could discourage people." He said, well, if there's no sin, then there's no salvation, right? If there's nothing to forgive. But the whole idea of holiness, and the word sanctification means to be set apart for a certain purpose, for a certain reason. And the pursuit of holiness. Holiness, without which what? We can't be like God. First Peter says, be ye holy as I'm holy. Ready to launch, he says, be holy. Let's see if I can find those little words. There are little words under those big words. Yeah. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Romans 12:1 says what? Consecration is to present ourselves to the Lord as a living sacrifice. Romans 12:1 says be a living. Why do we have to have a living sacrifice? Because it's the tendency to just keep walking off the throne. Cut me off. Be ye holy. Consecration or holiness is our loving resistance to Christ's constraining love. Let me give you turn to Psalm 5. If you, Josiah, do you have that? Would you read that, please? Yep. I'll tell you when I'll interrupt you. Okay. Stop there. Do you hear that? In the morning, what? Before that, you hear my voice, right? Here's my challenge to you, is to make this your daily commitment. Lord, in the morning you will hear my voice. I will prepare a sacrifice. And then I'll watch and wait and see what you say. That's so important for us. One of the challenges that my family's taken my car keys. And that's no fun. But so I said, well, Lord, how can I do anything? How can my family, it was time for me to have somebody else hold them. So, Lord, what do I do? How am I going to? And I'm learning the bus system in Tulsa. It's interesting because they said just go straight down 21st Street on this bus and you link up with this bus and go. But they forgot to tell me that it was on Saturday schedule only, so I got one ride in, and I had to wait an hour for the next ride. And so I said, so what's here, Lord, that I need to watch? What's here? Is there something here that needs, and there was an older lady sitting there, and I went and talked to her, and she said, you missed the bus. She was always from Eastern Europe. I said, what do you mean? She said, the bus is gone. And so we looked at the schedule. It wouldn't be back for an hour, but it was right there at 21st and Yale, and there's a Whataburger there. And I said, are you hungry? She said, yes, I'm hungry. So I walked up to Whataburger, and of course, I didn't have a car, so I just stood in line between two cars. And I got up to the window, and the lady said, we only have 2 workers here, and it's going to be 25 minutes before you can get a hamburger. All right, we're okay. So I waited and waited. Finally, they got the meal, and I took it to this lady, and she takes the food out and looks at me and says, no ketchup, no salt. Okay, so I got back in the car line, and looking, and so they gave me 2 salts and 2 ketchup. I take them back, and she says, only 2? Only 2 calls? Yes. But it was a reminder to me in that little way that God calls us in those simple ways to do that kind of work. To look around and say, what's going on in this place where I am right now that God would have me take that for the kingdom? What kind of awareness do I bring to that situation? What is it that God is calling us to in those little places of our lives? That's what holiness and consecration is. I have devoted myself to Him for this time. And it's fun doing that. I have a man working on a fence, put a fence up my house. When I say we help, he did the work. I'm the guy that could put a ball bearing in backwards. So we started talking, and we had this, and he said, I wonder why God would bring me to your house to fix a fence when I'm having all of these spiritual questions. Isn't that interesting? And so here's how I would encourage you to be evangelist in those situations. But I would encourage you to do it a different way. We've started with the 4 spiritual laws or 4 spiritual flaws, whatever. here's the best way, I think, today to introduce the gospel question. Just ask your friend, ask your coworker. And by the way, when I say ask your coworker, you're at work to work for that man, right? You do your talking and visiting on your own time. When you're there, you work, right? I get concerned that people would use their time that is obligated for work to be sharing the gospel even so. When you go, what I'm saying is when you go to work and work well and work hard. But then when you have time to be the gospel, here's the question you should ask. Ask that person that you're trying to talk to about the gospel. Do you think you've ever had a spiritual experience? And they almost all have. And so you seize on that and then begin to integrate the gospel into that conversation. So we're going to, looking down the day ahead, the days ahead, that we are uncharted for us. We have to be courageous. We have to be holy. We have to be prepared. And then he says that don't look to the right or to the left. We have to be steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for we know that our labor is not in vain in the Lord. And then the last thing, which is the best thing, we have not passed this way before, but God gives us this. I will never leave you nor forsake you. The greatest gift the gospel accords to us is the promise of his presence, right? Isn't that our great comfort? Isn't that our great joy? That I will never leave you nor forsake you. And he says, as I was with Moses, he's talking to Joshua, as I was with Moses, so I'll be with you. Only be courageous. Be holy. Be consecrated. And be confident. All of this is going on, but God is in control. Let's pray.